two, three.
Jim, I was able to share with you offline a very embarrassing and vulnerable share, which was that I am a very large aircraft, airplane, airline nerd. So to say I'm excited about this conversation would be a gross understatement. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely, Matt. And I have got to say, I am genuinely impressed with your knowledge and background. You're definitely an airline guy.
I I love it so much. I don't know what it is, if it's the complexity, if it's the relatability, if it's the fact that I spend a lot of my time involved in the network in one way, shape, or form. I spent 24 days on the road in January, so I got a real good dose of airlanes and airports and seats. And all that being said, you're so much more than an airline, Tim. So maybe walk us through a bit about your background, your experiences, and what's led you to today.
Sure, Matt. Well, I started my career back in at PricewaterhouseCoopers in their SAP practice, actually, and then left PricewaterhouseCoopers to do a startup in the early 2000s, along with many others, doing .com sorts of work in the HR space. So I did that for about 3.5 years, and then moved with my family to New York City and Manhattan. Took a job with Colgate-Palmolive and led their HR transformation efforts globally. And then took a role with New York Life, right on the other side of Grand Central Station.
Mm-hmm.
And then most recently, before joining Delta, I was with Corning in upstate New York. And now I'm down here in the great state of Georgia with Delta Airlines. And I started here in back half of 2018. I had an opportunity to see which was 2019 was probably the best year that Delta ever flew.
Mm-hmm.
And then got to see us go through one of the most difficult times in our history, the most difficult time in our history. And now we're on the other side of that, and we are rebuilding. And it's been quite an experience. And this Delta is one of those organizations as an HR professional. It's a great place to work. You know, we've got a phenomenal focus on the employee experience. It is a genuine and deeply felt commitment to our employees and the safety of our customers. It is a very genuine and heartfelt culture that we have here. So I'm thrilled to be here. We're doing some really cool stuff and looking forward to chatting with you about it.
I think that comes across, and I know you won't say this for yourself, so I'll say it for you. It was clear which organizations had a good relationship and a good culture when the pandemic hit, because that exposed a lot of things, good and bad, in terms of what was happening in organizations. And one thing that always struck me was just how successful Delta was in retaining a workforce that, to your point, went through a significant upheaval where one day there's full operations, the next day it's reduced operations, the day after it's essentially no operations or limited operations with no real line of sight to when, where, how, and with a workforce that has mounting obligations themselves in terms of financial things of that nature. So it creates a real strong tension, and the ability to weather that and come out the other side with an empowered and engaged and committed workforce speaks to the things you're talking about. Just want to acknowledge that, because that has an impact on the passenger experience, on the safety you're talking about, on all the things that matter to us as consumers that we may not think about when we're buying that ticket and going to the airport.
Yeah, very well put, Matt. Yeah, you know, and the opportunity to sort of experience that commitment. You know, often Ed, our CEO, we'd have town halls, and he would often say that the character of an organization like Delta is not defined during COVID. It's going to be revealed. And you know, the decisions that we made to protect the safety and health of our employees and customers really demonstrated to me, and I think everybody who lived through that, how genuinely held those values are. It doesn't get forgotten. And I think that's a large part of why, you know, the success that we're experiencing right now. We've had to hire over 25,000 people on the other side of COVID and help keep that culture intact. How we engage with customers, how we engage with each other, that had to be maintained, even with the influx of all these new employees. So it's a lot of what we're focused on right now. But as an HR professional, it was just very, very rewarding, to have a seat, to see how we rebuilt and how we worked through all of that.
A little inside baseball for the viewers or listeners of this is that we prepare interview guides in advance so that I can structure questions and give individuals like Tim an opportunity to contribute so we can really come up with a great conversation. And one of the questions I was going to ask, I look at it now, Tim, and I'm going, I don't want to ask this question anymore. I want to change it, which is the question was going to be, from a technological perspective, how do you see it affecting HR as it evolves over the next 10 years? But now I realize how impossible that is to actually answer. So let me ask the question a little bit different.
Sure.
So you've borne witness to a lot of innovation in HR over your career across a multitude of industries and seen the impact of technology as it's transformed the profession from filing paper-based documents into the first iteration of HR technologies, which is about forms, signatures and record repositories, into administrator focused systems that weren't really thinking about the employee experience or integration with other systems, to now the latest generation of technologies, which is both integrated and now going to be overlaid with AI. I'm curious, from your perspective, if we were to look back even just 24 months from now, what are some of the things that you're excited about as we think about integrating technology further into the employee experience, into the organizations that we were all working?
Yeah, I think, just, as you were mentioning, and just kind of doing a little bit of the time travel back in time and thinking about all those changes that have happened. And so much of the way that HR works today, right before we started recording here, we were talking about some of the work Dave Ehrlich and some of his groundbreaking work at the time in the 90s on the whole way.
HR business partner.
Business partners and COEs and the role of the business partners. And so I think, we have, throughout all those changes that you mentioned, as we went through, okay, we've got that, Dave's model on HR business partners and COEs and so forth. And we went through the internet, we developed a hyper-connected economy, a hyper-connected world, went through mobile and big data. And those roles fundamentally haven't changed terribly. We tried to, there was a period of time, as you'll recall, where, shared services was a big model, and outsourcing in the early 2000s. And we had the direct access channel with MSS and ESS sorts of functionality. But primarily the roles haven't evolved all of that much. And I think where we are today in many organizations, when you take a look at the HR service delivery channels, where that's sort of the direct access, shared services, and HR business partners, a lot of what happens, even today, we have sort of channel confusion for employees. I might start with my HR business partner, and the HR business partner says, oh, you can get that done online, or you need to call the help center for that. Surprisingly, a lot of those things, those challenges have evolved, have been maintained throughout all those evolutions. We still have, channel confusion and some frustration and reduction in employee experience at times. So what I think, to answer your question on what's coming up here, we're taking a page here at Delta from the customer side, where we try to we have our customer experience ribbon, which has, we work to reduce seams between the various stages of travel as the customer, meaning you won't feel as though you're forgotten. Like, we initiated a process with you on step one, and then you find yourself in a situation where it feels like we didn't know what happened in step one when we're at step four. Like, getting those seams removed, making sure there's continuous contact throughout that, so it's seamless and personalized. And that's a big part of, getting back to the channel confusion and some of the technology we're seeing now with generative AI, and the ability to use that to potentially, continue to work at removing seams in the employee experience ribbon, right? Because we've got them there as well. You start with one channel, and then it feels like you're starting all over again in another channel. And personalization. Personalization is something that we strive for very heavily on the CX side of the house, the customer experience. And we're asking ourselves, if we're asking our employees to bring those seamless experiences and those personalized experiences for our customers, why can't we do it for them? And so, I think what we're going to see here, particularly at Delta, I know we're highly focused on bringing those EX experiences to par. one of the things that really fundamentally shaped my thoughts on this very early on in my career here at Delta, I was walking across the campus, and we're coming out of one of the cafeterias or something, and somebody had made a remark. I guess we didn't hit the mark with their experience. They were at the headquarters here, and didn't have the best experience in the cafeteria. Something didn't go well. And the comment was, Delta expects us to show up for our customers and bring discretionary effort and moments that delight. But we just experienced this. And I got to, and I was just kind of listening as we were walking across the campus, and it struck me at how profound that is. And why would we not? A moment that delights, you've got an opportunity to get a lunch. Let's make something of that, and let's take a look at those other moments that matter. When you bring in your family expands, and today at Delta, we send out onesies for newborns, and so we try to find those moments that delight. So I think the answer to your question there, Matt, what I'd love to see here, at least at Delta, is increased seamlessness between the channels, the HR service delivery channels, a feeling of personalization where those moments that matter for you when you're early in career versus at different stages of your career, the ability for us to recognize that and know where you are and show up accordingly, not only sets the example and builds that EX, but hopefully builds discretionary effort in the hearts of our employees and to delight our customers. So that's a lot of what we're focusing on. And we're working very hard to make that happen.
And I think you're going to be successful ultimately in doing that because you have such a systemic approach to all the other things in your business. It's just overlaying the same principles, to your point, with the CX over the customer experience, removing the friction, and then applying that same thought process to your employee interactions is going to reveal and give the opportunity for similar results. Where I get excited for organizations like yours is when we start talking about, it's funny, we're very clear on the value proposition for the customer because it's such a direct transaction, right? Like revenue is profit's easy to measure. But the moment we add in one more intermediary, the employee, now it all suddenly becomes very hard to measure things. Mm-hmm. And you and I both know that there's a direct bottom line impact for treating employees well. You see reductions in turnover, you see increases in knowledge retention, lower incidents and accidents. We can prove out, especially with a large employee population, that there's a bottom line impact to doing certain employment activities well. And there's a consequence to doing certain employment activities not well. And this idea of HR as a profit center has been bandied about as kind of like the next iteration of models. And I've had the privilege of speaking with Dave as he's talked about re-envisioning the HR business partner for the latest evolution of organizations. And I think one thing I've learned in organizations, at least the publicly traded ones, is that as much as we try and resist it, the sole fiduciary responsibility of organizations is to enrich the shareholder. Like it just is. And if we can achieve other outcomes, we should do that. Employee experience, and health and safety, diversity and inclusion, all those things critically important. And all those things ultimately do drive profitability and therefore shareholder performance. Sure. By not communicating in those terms in HR and treating people like a cost center, we're doing ourselves a disservice because we're undervaluing the opportunity cost of doing things well. And I think there's an opportunity for organizations to articulate the value of doing things well from an employment practices perspective as we seek to mitigate future losses. Again, harder to prove than revenue coming in the front door that turns to profit. Opportunity cost is more for the actuaries of the world. And I've certainly sat through, as I'm sure you have, a number of board or finance-led meetings where opportunity cost was a big topic of this conversation. So I don't think it's a foreign concept either. It's an opportunity for us to just reimagine how we think about things and to bring a different perspective to a conversation that I think needs it. When you think about Delta and the organization and the role there, I know a big part of your role is working with other senior leaders, that you're constantly providing counsel on, how do we support our employees? How do we do the right things for our culture? How do we do the right things for our customer? And it's a challenging time. You mentioned it earlier. I'm just curious, as an aside, how are you approaching counseling leaders these days? And how is that different than maybe it was 3 to 4 or 5 years ago? How does that look in 2024 for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the idea of HR as a profit center, I think at its core, the DNA of that idea makes a lot of sense, right? And I think the highest performing HR organizations have that mentality, right? They're more than just the administrative burden, right? That sits on top of the organization as a corporate function. For us, the benefit for me personally, working here at Delta, there is our business planning process all focuses on something we call the flight plan. And the flight plan is been consistent for many, many years now, certainly longer than I've worked here. And it contains four parts and they don't change. And it includes the employee experience leading to the customer experience, and not just when they're flying with us or in the airports, but in the communities that they live. We want to engage there as well. And the idea is when customers choose Delta, the fourth part of our virtuous circle are our shareholders. They also choose Delta, right? And that keeps the flywheel turning. So, that intrinsically puts in every HR professional's mind here at Delta that what we do links ultimately to the success of our company. So that fourth part there, that EX, the employee experience piece, that's our wheelhouse as HR professionals. So, and we are doing things that, you made the point around measuring, really, really important. And we use Qualtrics as a measuring tool. We have both engagement surveys, as most companies do, sort of this top-down, twice a year, how you're feeling sort of survey.
Yeah.
But we've also implemented what we call sort of listening posts across the employee experience ribbon. So when particular events occur, we're able to track what we're calling sort of internal eNPS. And we are in a search for empirical evidence between increases in eNPS and increases on the CX side, or NPS, Net Promoter Score, on that side. So we're going about this with tools and technology to measure how we impact. I think the folks in accounting and finance have a different, they'll look at it and raw, cost in terms of, we're a cost center as much as we would like. And we often find this when we're trying to make our business cases around investment and so forth. At the end of the day, we're a cost center. But our ability to persuade our internal, as we seek budget and investment, it makes it a lot easier when we're able to show. We've had there's a CX organization here at Delta. And we sit at the table with them and collaborate on ways to solve for CX issues. And we establish additional listening posts. We empirically look at the evidence and the data, find causality, and then we bring the capital in to address those sorts of issues. So, yeah, I think to the essence of your question there around HR as a profit center, we certainly operate like one here. So yeah, I think, we always have opportunities to improve and get better at it. And we really love the partnership we've got with Qualtrics right now. We have Qualtrics implemented across the employee and customer experience ribbons, which allow us to accelerate some of the discovery of linkages between CX and EX. So the tools and the methods and our culture and business planning all keeps us focused in the right way.
You've had the opportunity to be part of a lot of transformations in large organizations. And I'm curious, as you look back at those experiences, are there any common themes about things that worked, or maybe things that set you up for success as you look back at those four transformations and tiptoe through memory lane?
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I think for your listeners, in keeping it something that's easy to kind of carry away with you, right? We focus on people, process, and technology. So in order to break free that value and drive the modernization and transformation efforts, Those are three categories that are always required. They're always in every formula. They're in every recipe. And when you start, as often has been the case, and we still fight this here at Delta, when you start with technology, as opposed to starting with your people and process, you tend to have a bad day. So we have worked really, really hard to help educate a lot of our internal customers that we work with, start with the hearts and minds of people, engage deeply with the real world, like frontline employees and managers who are going to be asked to use these tools and these processes and operation capabilities and so forth, understand where they're coming from, codify that rigorously through processes like design thinking and process excellence, document it out, recirculate that back with people, make sure that everybody's on the same page, get the requirements clear, prioritize the requirements, and then do the gap analysis with the technology. And the outcome is going to be significantly better than if you. Oftentimes, what we find, people will engage with us, and I'm thinking more about, even throughout my entire career, you get a knock on the door when they're like, "Hey, we just spoke with vendor X, and we'd like to start installing the software on Monday."
Got a deal.
Yeah, here we go, rock and roll. And so oftentimes, we've gotten quite good here at turning them around, particularly early on in my career when I was hired. We had just gone through some very, very challenging projects that HR technology and process automation and so forth hadn't been invested in quite a long time. So around 2014, after we really got on our feet after the merger and the bankruptcy and 9/11 created a whole decade of sort of the lost decade in terms of investment. 2014, things changed for us. After a result of focusing on time with bags and clean and just doing that ruthlessly and executing, we finally were able to get some investment, and we tried to make up for a lot of the sins of the past and implement a lot of technology. And we were very, very focused on that. And I think the big lesson coming out of that was, in retrospect, we bit off a lot, but refocusing on the people and the process pieces of that, we were able to build on a lot of the learnings that came from there, and feel like we're in a good place. Thanks to all the work that's happened in the past, we're in a good place today.
Been there. It's challenging, and one lesson I learned, which sounds like was also in this process for yourself, was people have a capacity for change, and you have to keep mind of that, understanding that even though that future state might deliver benefit, there is a path to get to future state that requires change, and that requires effort and intention and disruption to people's routines. And we have to account for that when we think about things like productivity, or when we think about how much change an organization can ingest at any one period of time and do it effectively. So it's really salient advice, and I appreciate you kind of surfacing that for us.
Sure.
As we think about, again, this kind of future and the employee, one thing that you developed at Delta was this single view of the employee lens. I'm just curious if you could talk a bit about what that means for you and how it shows up in practice.
Sure. So for us, we have many, many systems and many sources of data here, as you can imagine. And when we envisioned our future roadmap here, it really started, as I mentioned earlier, with the flight plan, our virtuous circle. We focused on employee experience. Employee experience is going to generate a lot of X data, right? Experiential sorts of things, as well as the O data, all right? This person joined on this date, this person got promoted on that date, this person got paid on that date. And so what we wanted to have is a single place where all that X and O data could go. And at the time when we began, we had a lot of the O data and not as much of the X data, but we have since created really important sources of X data. But what single view of the employee is really, it's an AWS environment that has been set up. We work very closely with our IT professionals. And we started off with really the fundamentals and the basics of employee data, and we have since continued to expand that. And what that's going to allow us to do is create greater insights into the causality of, the relationships between X and O data. And we are chipping away at it. We got a phenomenal team of people who are working on this. So it is essentially, it's our big data solution for this. But we're doing it in a very thoughtful and deliberate way. We've got our internal reporting and analytics teams. Great partnership with them. They are basically our customers, and they will. There's an intake process they go through. There's sort of the areas that they're exploring. We just make certain that the source, the content is available with data catalogs and so forth that make it easier for our data scientists to get at it. And so we're well on our way with our single view of the employee, and it's going to become. It is more than just an enterprise data warehouse sort of thing. The idea there is certainly in the longer run, the use of AI and other sorts of tools. All of those are based on having really good quality data, and so we're focused like a laser on that right now.
Data is such a fascinating topic. I've told this story far too many times in this podcast, so my longtime guests or longtime listeners are going to roll their eyes. But in a previous life, I oversaw analytics for Walmart. So, like you, sat on a absolute mountain of data, and I was so excited when we had that job. Like, I was just like, the amount of inputs I'm going to be able to, just analyze and just, draw correlations and really make the customer experience, the employee experience, like just make it better for people.
Mhm.
Was kind of a bit heartbroken when I realized that a lot of the job was managing politics. Whereas the data at that time in that culture of that organization, it was really leveraged as a vehicle to incite accountability.
Mhm.
And as a consequence, people resisted taking it and therefore participating in an action planning process that was meant to actually see continuous improvement.
Yeah.
So, or we question things like recency or accuracy or relevancy of data, again, as opposed to let's peel back what the message says and how we can help influence the result going forward.
Mhm.
So in a subsequent organization, I brought in place a practice that said people analytics data would not be used in a disciplinary context unless there was an integrity issue.
Mhm.
And then at that point, that freed up more collaboration between our operational partners and HR to try and solve these issues at the root cause, as
Mhm.
opposed to just simply playing KPI whack-a-mole and just trying to make the scorecard as green as possible for the next month.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I get really excited about artificial intelligence because I feel like a lot of organizations are sitting on mountains of useful data, but just don't have the internal horsepower to
Mhm.
take action with it, to infer insights, and to use the information alongside other forms of data to make informed decisions. And clearly, you guys are way ahead in the trajectory around using data, inferring data, drawing those insights. So I wouldn't mind if you would answer two questions. It's kind of a two-parter. The first one is for organizations that are just beginning the data journey. If you could just talk a bit about what is life like in using data at Delta and how does it help your practice? And then the second part is as you think about the future of data using artificial intelligence, what are you excited about in terms of what's possible with that, new technology, that new interface of dealing with information?
Yeah. So for us, um, as you can imagine, right, Delta is a unique blend of um, we celebrate arriving somewhere on the other side of the planet 2 minutes early, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is an engineering excellence and a majesty to seeing all this metal flying through the air, right? So you've got this scientific piece and you've got this magical piece, and then obviously there's a heart to all of that. So one of the things I really love about working here is it brings together all of those dimensions of the human condition, right? When you take that and you think about, all right, well then an HR professional working at Delta, you would imagine, very steeped in data, right? Data driven sorts of decisions. But then how do you balance that with the heart side of it? And I think, for us, we've got self-service capabilities for HR professionals to go in there and access data. There's a balancing act, as you know, Matt, right? When you have a narrative that is being expressed within, let's say, in a particular operating division, and you're an HR professional your job is to champion your division, your client group, and bringing in data, as well as the less empirical sorts of information, to help promote what your client is trying to get done is really important for all HR professionals. So I think for us, our job here, and when we think about, we got a phenomenal HR business partner team, we want to make it available to them and make it easy. So we've got an analytics team that has also an intake process, so they can, either through shared services or direct access, get the information that they need. We're continually trying to make that easier for them, and really just kind of support them where they are, and let them make the choices and the decisions. At the end of the day, we've got the leadership team and within our divisions and our various client groups who work very hard at making certain that we've got a great team of leaders, who can use both the math side of their brains as well as the emotional side of things, to chart the course. So that's, that would be the answer to the first part here. Like, what's it like, and how does data and as an HR business partner here working with that, what does that feel like? We're just trying to empower, and in the job that I'm in, it's just really about making sure that our internal customers, HR business partners, and analytics teams and so forth have what they need to do their job. With what's coming up here, Matt, for us, the X and O data, as I'd mentioned, around single view of the employee and presenting more and more of the experiential information to HR business partners and our internal client groups, really, really excited about that. They're very well versed in sort of the engagement survey results. So there's the formality to that, and the reports become available, and you can kind of see how you've done. And now feathering that in with listening posts that can get increasingly focused on, so what's happening within your division, and what are the employee experiences that are really driving that spirit within your teams. We're going to layer that in and make that more available to folks. So yeah, and then obviously, and maybe we'll get to this in a little bit, with the generative AI and all of that gets unlocked with all that high quality data. Really, really excited about that. We've got some really interesting, I think, proof of concepts that we're building right now with companies like SAP and others, that we're really excited to talk about.
Companies are going to look very different 24 months from now than they do today, and AI is going to be a big part of it. I share your excitement for the technology. I think it has the opportunity to democratize access to information in a way that we haven't been able to this point. I think it's going to create, it's going to narrow the competitive landscape in some cases for smaller organizations and bigger organizations. I think it's going to enrich, or at least has the potential to enrich, decision-making processes in companies, which I think can't be a bad thing. And I also want to point out, in all of this, there's always going to be a place for judgment, and we'll always have to apply judgment, whether we have the perfect set of solutions in front of us. And that's where, may bring this full circle, it starts again with leadership. And it sounds like the things you're doing in your organization, the leadership principles, the values, really permeate throughout the entirety of it, down through the process and the technology, but most importantly, the people.
Yeah.
Tim, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great conversation. I learned a ton, and I certainly enjoyed myself. Looking forward to continuing this chat offline.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you.